What's up, everybody? Welcome to Fantasy Sports Now. Today, I want to talk to you about some catcher strategy and some catchers that I actually do like. I purposely kept this list towards the end because I think there's not a ton to talk about here. Obviously, catcher is very league dependent. If you're in a league that has very little bench spots and it requires you to have a catcher at all times, then yeah, put more priority into catcher. But if you're in kind of a standard league that has a ton of bench spots and you have a ton of room, then catcher is way less important. And I want to get into that a little bit today. If you like what you see, hit me with a sub, hit me with a like, whatever you want, but I'm a man of content, so I want to just jump right into it. Over the weekend, we had our draft, and I noticed a trend that catchers were going a little bit late, but I would continue to take catchers insanely late. Don't look for Real Muto. Don't look for Salvador Perez. Their ADPs are in the hundreds when you could be taking guys that have significant value at a position. Catchers are a weird one because they don't play every day. They play every other day. If you have a huge bench, you can have two catchers if you really want to start one every day. And you could equate those two to one really good catcher or even better. So for me, I always, I don't want to say punt, but I essentially punt my catcher almost every year, and it usually works out. Again, unless you're in this league that has one bench spot, I would not be reaching for catcher. Usually there's breakout catchers that can be picked up every year. Last year, Pedro Severino was one of these guys who came out all of a sudden as hitting 330, and he wasn't owned in almost every league. And he had put up great fantasy points. So it's not a position that I look to gain some value from. It's a position that I just try to get a little bit off the top, but I'd rather have a stronger shortstop, a stronger outfield. You know, while you're taking Real Muto, I might be taking Mondesi or Chapman. And your third baseman's going to end up being Moustakas, which is fine, but it's just not the same value. So I would much rather have a lower catcher and a better player up front, especially if it's pitching. You know, pitching is very, very low this year. There's not a lot of depth in great pitching, so I would much rather have pitching than taking an early catcher. With all that said, though, let's talk about some catchers that I do like, and what do I do when I look for a catcher. What I look for is a guy later in the draft that has the highest upside possible. And, you know, I'll give you the first two names right off the bat. Obviously, Grandal is ranked 5th, so if you are a guy who is like, I need to get a catcher, I would pass on the top 4 and look at Grandal at 130 at least in the average draft pick. That at least seems like decent value. I mean, it's still a little too much for me, but I'm talking about upside. And these first two guys have insane upside for their ADP. Grandal, I look for opportunity, essentially, is what I'm saying. Chicago White Sox, they're going to have a great offense. They have a great hitter's park. So when he's out on the field, he's going to be scoring fantasy points, right? And it's very similar with Gary Sanchez. Gary Sanchez I owned last year, and he was downright awful. I do equate part of it. So there's a weird thing with Gary Sanchez. He's got this history of being like a lazy kind of player. You know, he doesn't run out to first. He had that one infamous double play where he didn't run out the ball, and he could have been safe. They could have won the game. You know, he's not the guy that, you know, gets the drop and block and then sprints and goes gets the ball really quick. It's just not him. He's obviously been known as a hit-first kind of player, and last year, I think, was kind of a COVID. He showed up out of shape. He showed up not ready to play. He might have assumed that there wasn't going to be a season. Some people took that opportunity to like make major gains in their game, and he just didn't. It didn't seem like he did. Assumed that he would be fine, and he wasn't. I think that a major league player who's worked that hard to get this far is somebody who's going to recognize what happened last year. Vlad did this and lost 42 pounds. I'm expecting Gary Sanchez to bounce back and really bounce back in a big, big way. You know, Aaron Judge was talking about how Gary Sanchez could win the MVP. I think that's ridiculous. But Gary Sanchez could easily jump back into the top 2 catching conversation, which I like. And honestly, to take him and even if he is terrible, then you go pick up this catcher that has is playing better. It's fine to take a gamble at catcher with a guy like Gary Sanchez and completely flop because you don't lose that much value. You're not taking your third overall pick on Gary Sanchez. This is a late pick, a guy that you could pick up off the waivers, can come in and fill in that spot if he needs to. So you could have potentially the second best catcher in the league, or somebody who you end up dropping. But I like the risk reward there, and really for both of them. So moving on, another guy I like, Sean Murphy, just because he's got like youth. It's like I just like that he's young and that he's going to play, and I think that he's got great upside. And I think this is more of one of my targets than most people because he's much later, and I think that he has potential to be a top 5 catcher. It's similar to Gary Sanchez in the sense that Gary, I think, will be a top 2 to cut, whereas Sean Murphy, I think, will be like top 5 to maybe probably. You're probably not going to cut him because I think that he's got a higher floor but a lower ceiling. So I feel comfortable taking him this late though, and not really losing a whole lot by doing it. And the last one is a great situation is James Mccann. I know some people are kind of pulling away from James Mccann, but I just love the Mets offensive lineup so much that I can't deny this. It's another one of these that I feel like his ceiling is a top 5 catcher, and his floor, is maybe 15th or whatever. But I think that he can really elevate into another world where getting picked or getting ranked 11th is kind of a joke. He's one of these guys that I think next year will get taken too soon because he had a good year this year. So this is my list over here of the guys that I would be targeting as catchers, the later guys, the guys with high upside, and I'm not spending that much capital at catcher. I just don't like to spend capital at catcher. I'd rather have a better starter than a weaker starter later. So that's the list, guys. I don't want to waste too much of your time. If you like what you saw, hit me up and we'll do some more videos.